The Habs snapped their 5-game losing streak. Mind you, it was against the Arizona Coyotes, but a win's a win, right? This is Hockey Inside Out. Hello and welcome to Hockey Inside Out. I'm your host, Jessica Rusnak. Joining me on the panel this week, we've got Stu Cowan from the Montreal Gazette. We've got former NHLer, Stanley Cup champ, and former assistant coach with the Montreal Canadiens, Rick Green. And we've got independent hockey analyst Andrew Berkshire joining us this week. Now, the Montreal Canadiens just went through a stretch of their worst hockey, losing 5 games in a row. But Captain Nick Suzuki said that he has seen some improvement individually and collectively on this team. What do you think about those comments from the captain? Is it something that you have to say when you're going through a tough time like that? Or do you see there's some truth in it? Stu, what about you start us off today?
Well, he sort of has to say that as the captain and the leader of the team, but they did play pretty well in those 5 games they lost. They lost 3 of them, I believe, by 1 goal. And then they played terrible against Arizona, and they won. That was Marty St. Louis said they didn't have their fastball. They weren't cohesive, but earlier in the day after the morning skate Tuesday, St. Louis was talking about how he doesn't judge everything on wins and losses. He says there's games that they win, and in the coaches' meeting after the game, they're upset because the guys didn't play well, and there's games that they lose, and they're sort of happy because they did play well. So it's part of a rebuilding team. 5-game losing streak is the longest they've had this year. They had 7-game losing streaks last year, I think twice. So it was a big win for them. Plus they're going on the road. They've struggled at home. It was a terrible Arizona team, and Arizona took the play to them most of the night. But Sam Montembeault was fantastic, and he's showing again why he can be a number 1 goalie, I think, in the NHL. He's not Carey Price. He's not Patrick Roy, but he's a goalie who gives your team a chance to win every game, and he gave the Canes a chance to win last night, and they did.
I mean, let's face it. 30 being outshot 38-21 against Arizona. Arizona, I don't know whether they were playing that much better or Montreal just wasn't really into it. But a tough game to watch. Montembeault, as Stu mentioned, was good. A good thing he was because there are a lot of real good chances that Arizona was given the opportunity to score, and he made the difference. But man, oh man, it looked like they really struggled in a lot of areas again, and it's not what you want to see. And it's you talk about individuals. I mean, Nick is obviously a bright spot with what he's being able to do offensively, and I've got to mention Jonathan Waugh in this group because as much as he doesn't log a lot of minutes, he's still got some great things happening for him, and I like to watch him, and I think there's going to be some good things happening in the future for him. But overall, as the team, it's giving up the chances that they give, kind of a run and gun style of play, same old, tough to see, and it's going to be a long stretch for the rest of the season.
I actually wrote about this. The Canadiens have been playing very strong lately. They had a stretch of 7 straight games where, based on 2 different analytical models, they were leading in 5-on-5 expected goals. 7 straight games. Doesn't sound like a big deal, but for this team, that's the longest such stretch since the 2021 Stanley Cup final run. So this is a very rare thing that's happened. And the fact that it happened post Sean Monahan trade, when the team should theoretically be at its thinnest, is actually really encouraging. And during that run, the goaltending was inconsistent, whereas they had a stretch of 16 games before that where they were the better team at even strength just one time, and incredible goaltending pulled out some crazy wins during that stretch. So it's been kind of upside down land for the Canadiens until against the Coyotes, where Sam Montembeault stands on his head. The team puts in a bit of a poor effort where they're not connected. The passes aren't hitting, and it's back to about normal for this team, except for without any power plays. That's been the big thing recently. But it's been interesting to see them because this is a team that hasn't been able to function in this way for a long time. And now all of a sudden they're starting to put good games together. And yes, they had a bad game, but I think Joshua Waugh is such an important ingredient here because everywhere that he's gone since he's been called up both times, the puck has been moving into the offensive zone consistently. It's not staying in his own zone. You watch him in transition, and it's quick plays. He's on top of pucks. He's creating turnovers for his teams, quick passes to start transition or moving the puck up the ice himself. I think he's asserted himself as a much more important player in this rebuild than anybody thought this early on. Even his biggest boosters, they expected maybe by the end of the season he could stick around. Right now, he looks like a legit top 6 player.
I think we're seeing in Joshua Waugh what Connor Bedard saw in him when he was his linemate at the World Juniors last year. And Connor Bedard said he was one of the smartest hockey players he had ever played with on a line. Coming from Connor Bedard, that's really something. It's interesting, though, too, Andrew, you mentioned the power play. The Habs haven't had a single power play in the last 2 games, which is quite remarkable. And, going back to Sam Monto, it was his bobblehead night last night, too, or Tuesday night. And he's one of my favorite guys to talk to in the room, because he's so calm and cool. He's very much like Carey Price in that way, but he's also got a really good sense of humor. And his bobblehead actually looks like him, which a lot of them don't. And he noted that. And then he said, he was asked if he felt more pressure on bobblehead night. He says, yeah, he said, I didn't want fans leaving the Bell Center and throwing the bobbleheads in the garbage on the way out. So I think fans who got the bobblehead last night will be happy to keep it.
And he mentioned that he really liked the hair on the bobblehead. He felt that it really represented him well. So maybe there could be a hair deal for him somewhere in the future.
Making those guys jealous.
Following the Montreal Canadiens tradition, right, with Maurice Rashard, get some grays in there, and then you could, what was it, Grecian formula? Is that what
Grecian
it was?
formula. I leave a little bit of gray. That was it.
But I do have to bring up the point, Arizona 12-game, losing streak, and then they come in and basically watching the Canadiens perform in their zone was, I'll call it horrendous, because I have a really, really hard time watching them all over the place with so much confusion on what their jobs are. And I've mentioned a number of times before, but I'm going to mention it again. Until they figure out what they're supposed to be doing, what they're not supposed to be doing from that blue line in, they're just not going to be able to get the results that they're hoping for. And it's really tough to watch. And as a guy that took a lot of pride in position and trying to shore up some of the areas that were problem areas, it just seems to consistently show up as a real problem area. And hopefully they're talking about it and going to find a way to identify what they need to do, because it's really, really tough to watch.
Well,
Yeah, I can identify a couple things for them right away if they want. Rush defense, they don't defend the blue line very well at all, and they're far too casual trying to exit their own zone. They play a possession style, so their defense and their forwards are encouraged. If they don't like what they see, instead of dumping the puck in from center ice, they circle back into their own zone, which is, I think, a good thing long term. I think good teams play that way. But right now, they're a little bit too casual going back into their own zone with the puck. And how many times have we seen where they have the puck close to a clearance and it's just a soft touch that gets picked off, or they try to go up the wall, not hard enough to get it out? I think they need to bear down a little bit on those dump outs. I think that I don't have the data in front of me, because I know it exists from working at Sportlogic years ago, but their dump out rate, like their success rate on it, has to be one of the lowest in the league. They've got to get better at that. It's a simple thing that in emergency situations, you've got to get a handle on and be able to accomplish effectively. It's not the best strategy for always exiting your zone, but when you're under pressure, you got to clear the zone. And they have a lot of trouble with that. And I think Arizona keyed in on the rush, which is what they're good at as a team, and holding the zone when the Canadiens have the puck and they're under pressure. And it really, really hurt them.
Yeah, the Coyotes were pumped up to play in front of more than 4,500 fans.
Now, the Habs are on track to miss the playoffs for the 3rd straight year. How tough is it for players to keep their spirits up during this? Now, I know players have a lot to play for pride, future contracts. But at the same time, when you're not making the postseason, you're seeing all the other, well, not all the other teams, but the other teams get in. It can start to weigh on you. Rick, I think you have some experience in this department. If you want to share your thoughts.
Well, it's tough. I mean, let's face it. Fortunately, my time here, in Montreal, we didn't have to deal with that on, very often, but it's what it is. And these guys don't like it. Everywhere you go, you probably have people coming up to them and saying, what's going on? When's it going to get better? it's a tough situation. But listen, these guys are professionals, and they have to perform and try to perform at their very best each night. And the amazing part for me is the fans have been obviously very, very patient in watching what they're watching from a standpoint of the boos are less than what I've seen in other years, and the results are not happening, and yet they continue to cheer the team on, which is, I guess, not a bad thing. But things are going to have to change here soon before people run out of patience, and they want to see more things happening. And it's a city that thrives on playoffs, as we've seen a few years ago. And if they're not going in the right direction, then there's got to be some big concern with everybody that's involved in the game, on the ice and off the ice.
Well, the Team Tank fans will be happy with these losses, but the players obviously aren't. They don't really care about the draft picks. They want to win. They're competitors. That's why they're in the NHL. And I don't think Canadiens management wants this team to tank either, despite, they've traded Monahan, and they might make more trades before the deal, but they don't want that losing attitude to get into the locker room and become a habit like what we've seen in Buffalo and the Ottawa and teams like that. Once you get used to losing a lot, it's hard to flip a switch and become a winning team. So it was nice to see Nick Suzuki the other day talking about, we're trying to win as many games as we possibly can. It's obvious from a player's standpoint, but the players on this team, the compete level's still there. As Rick said, the biggest concern I think is still their defensive zone coverage, and their record's almost the same as it was at this point last year, and their goals against are almost the same. That's something that they really need to work on. But 3 years in a row not in the playoffs, it's got to be difficult, especially for younger guys who haven't had a taste. And then a guy like Brendan Gallagher, he's been taking a lot of heat this season because of the way he's not playing, but the way he's playing, after they started this rebuild, he's one of the guys who, I want to win. I want to win. And for a guy guys later in their career, you wonder how many chances you're going to get back in the playoffs and go on a run. So it's a difficult situation. They're not going to, they're obviously not going to make the playoffs this year. The rebuild still, you get some more forwards who can score. But it's got to be difficult at times. So I think that win against Arizona was big as they go on the road now, give them a little bit of a boost. They got a tough schedule coming up, Florida and Tampa and Nashville and Carolina. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a really tough road trip this one.
Yeah, I think this year is the year that I'm not really worried about for people getting upset. I think that fans are bought in for the most part. Most fans understand what's going on here. It's the first time where we've had an actual rebuild in Montreal in the cap era, in the my lifetime, really, where you're actually bottoming out to build this way. It's a new way of building for this fan base. And I think they understand what's necessary to create a contender. For the players, I think it's a little bit tougher because it's their lives, it's their jobs every day to go in there and try to win against much better teams. But at the same time, I think the players, especially guys like Nick Suzuki and Cole Coffield, who essentially started their career with playoff success, they can look at what's happened this year and they say, listen, we had Kirby Dach for one game. Cole Caulfield's shooting percentage is half of what it was for the rest of the time under Marty St. Louis. A couple of things changed next year. Joshua was a full-time NHLer. This team could be a lot better to play on next year. Maybe not in the playoffs, but exciting to watch. Maybe they make an ad over the offseason. I think next year, if it ends up being this poor, that's when players might start getting disillusioned. But if there's a progressive step forward, then you get closer, right? You're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. But this year right now, I think that there's enough going on that players understand that there was really no way for this team to ascend further than it already has. There's so many injuries that they've had to deal with, bad contracts that are still on the team. This is a normal path forward. And I think that next year is the time when we can be talking about players being unsatisfied and losing culture. I mean, think about the Ottawa Senators, or the Buffalo Sabres, how long they've been stuck like this. I think the Canadiens need to avoid that. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But 3 years of bottoming out is takeable. I'm trying to figure out a better word. Like it's something that you can hold, you can push yourself through as a player.
The thing that's going to really make it hard for the Canadiens is just how good the other teams in their division are. Like it's going to be, Buffalo and Ottawa both not going to make the playoffs this year. Next year they're going to be better. It's not going to get easier for this team moving forward when it comes to, even as they improve. It's not going to be easy for the Canadiens to get into the playoffs.
But what do you think with the fans? You're saying that the players, they can understand it, but ticket prices, they're not cheap. Especially if you paid to see that game at the Bell Center against the Habs and the Arizona Coyotes. It wasn't the most thrilling game. You didn't really get your money's worth there. But at a certain point, I think fans are going to say, okay, enough's enough. I want to start seeing results. I can only be a good cheerleader for so long. Like, what do you think is the lifespan for this sort of very positive fan response to this team right now?
Well, the thing that helps the Canadiens, you look in Winnipeg where, Gary Bettman was there and there's concern about, attendance dropping and they have a really good team. It's because in Winnipeg, they don't have the corporate money to buy these season tickets, right? And Montreal, the fan base is corporate money. I mean, most people there's not a lot of just regular people who have season tickets, or if they are, they're pretty wealthy. Mostly it's like, I have season tickets through my company and I go, hey, Jess, Andrew, you want to go to the game tomorrow night? Here's my tickets. And you go, that's sort of what the Canadiens have going for them, with fans not getting as upset because it's a corporate base. The fan base here is in Winnipeg. It's more of a community base, and that's why ticket prices are really expensive. And Winnipeg's a perfect example of a problem the NHL has, where the corporate money isn't there to buy the tickets. It's a lot of money for fans to fork out. I was watching that Arizona game the other night, and I was talking with Herb Zurkowsky sitting beside me. I said, "Man, I'm glad we didn't pay $400 to watch this tonight." And some people might be wondering that. But again, so much of the ticket base is corporate in Montreal. And that's why the Bell Center is full. Like, even when there's empty seats, they're paid for. But the fan base, I mean, it's changed so much. I remember when the Stanley Cup was an annual thing for the Canadiens. And a lot of the fan base in this Canadiens team has never experienced a Stanley Cup winning team. There's just that one thing in 2021. So I think people are still hungry for this team, and they want this team to do well so much. This team is such a big part of the city. As Andrew mentioned earlier, I think fans understand what's going on with the rebuild. But next year, I agree. Next year, I think at this point next season, if they're in a similar position, I think fans are going to start getting fed up.
Yeah, the Canadiens have this really special thing going on right now where they're in a rebuild, and the culture at the Bell Center specifically is so organically positive. It hasn't been that way. Like Stu said, like before, the standards have always been much higher. But if you keep increasing ticket prices, I think that they could wreck that very quickly. So I think the Canadiens do have to be extremely careful over the next couple of years here, because there's going to be a temptation once the team gets a little bit more competitive to jack things up further, and they raise prices this year. I think they've got to be careful. I think you read the tea leaves of what's going on across Canada, across North America, across the world, and inflation and grocery prices and all this stuff. Housing costs completely out of proportion to what people actually make. Eventually there's going to be a squeeze, and the first thing that gets cut when things get squeezed is your fun stuff, right? So the Canadiens will have to be cognizant of that going forward, unless the world changes. But right now they're in a good sweet spot, and they've got to work really hard to maintain that.
But not just, talking about tickets at the Bell Center. Like, remember towards the end of Dominic Ducharme's time here with the Canadiens, was you talk to someone, hey, did you watch the Habs game last night? I'm not turning that on. Like, you're also like, that's also the thing too, that when will fans start, not even turning on the Habs game to watch from home, let alone go to the Bell Center and pay the money to go see a game?
Yeah, I think as long as the compete level's there, and as long as there are young prospects in the system, like there's excitement, Lane Hudson coming up, and Logan Mailloux coming up, and Joshua Waugh coming up. They didn't have that before. Like, you used to watch a Laval game or an Ice Caps game before that. There was nobody there that was going to play for the Canadiens. There was just like a bunch of guys on the AHL team. That's changed. So I think that's one of the reasons why there's an excitement. And it's not just the ticket prices. I mean, if you get free tickets to the game, it's still $41 to park at the Bell Center if you want to park at the Bell Center. It's still $15 or whatever for a beer. It's still like $5 for a hot dog. Even with free tickets, it can be an expensive night out. But I agree, Andrew. The Canadiens need to be cognizant. Like, it's you see what's happening in Winnipeg. As I mentioned, there's much more of a corporate base here. But if it's hard, if corporate people can't give their tickets away, if people don't want them, then if they start wondering, well, is it worth getting them? Do we keep season tickets, or do we just buy like tickets for 10 games? So that it's something the Canadiens need to have in the back of their mind.
And I think, even though there's a lot of corporate money being spent to watch the Canadiens, it comes a point in time where you say, okay, these guys are paying this kind of money to see something, some kind of results. And I'm saying that maybe in the near future and next year, if they don't start to see some better results, there might be a little more noise as far as, not accepting what they're seeing happening. But Stu, mentioned a few guys in the system that is keeping people somewhat up and excited to the point where we'll deal with these growing pains a little bit easier, with the hope that on the horizon we have some potential good players that are going to be entertaining and probably contribute in a very positive way in the win-loss column. So we're at an interesting time, I think, with the so-called rebuild. But I think the clock is starting to tick, and I think that they're going to have to get something going in a much more positive way in a lot of areas starting next year.
Well, there were quite a few empty seats down low for the Arizona game, and they were paid for. I mean, they're season tickets. It means that season ticket holders couldn't give them away, or people didn't want them. So that's another thing that, empty seats don't buy hot dogs and beers and pay for parking. So that's another thing that has to be a concern moving forward.
Moving on to rapid fire. Now, Cole Coffield is on pace to finish with less than 30 goals on the season. At the beginning of the year, I think our first episode, we were predicting a lot of goals from Cole Coffield, but it hasn't necessarily gone that way so far. How disappointing is it that Cole Coffield hasn't been able to put up the numbers that many people anticipated? Andrew?
I think it's a little bit disappointing, but I think that we kind of missed the forest for the trees with Coffield. I think coming off that shoulder surgery, clearly something needs recalibrating. It just takes time to figure out his finishing touch. But at the same time, he's had better quality looks from better locations with better passes than any season prior. His underlying numbers are better than any other point in his career. He's shooting more often, getting more scoring chances. So I think when I look at it and I think, is Cole Coffield a below NHL average, including defenseman, shooter? No. So I look at the shots that he's taking. He's been robbed a lot this season. I think he's been wildly unlucky. I think next season he's going to end up shooting the lights out. Before this season, under Marty St. Louis, his shooting percentage was over 17%. Right now it's 8.5%. So you could essentially double it based on the shots that he's taken. And I don't think if he had like 38 goals right now, anybody would be upset. And yes, it's an imaginary doubling, right? But it's something that looking forward into the future, all signs point to everything being about what we expected with Cole Coffield, even if this season is bad. And I think if you're a guy or a girl who really likes the tank, you should be really happy that Cole Coffield has had this bad season at the right time. And at the same time, he's been much better from a playmaking perspective and a defensive perspective. So I'm still positive on Cole Coffield, even with the goal drop.
Yeah, I agree with you, Andrew. I'm still positive about Cole Coffield. I mean, if you ask him, of course, he'd be the first one to say that he's really disappointed that the results are not happening. But if you look at his play and the things that he does, I love to watch this guy play. He's a smart player. He gets opportunity. Yes, he's not getting the finish that he had previously, but he's feeling it a little bit with the new contract that he's supposed to be delivering a little bit more than what he is to date. But the upside is the potential is there for this kid to make things happen more often than not, and I really enjoy watching what he brings to the game because he does care and he does want to make the difference. And he's a young guy, and let's let him find his way because he will, and huge part of the hockey club.
Well, it's definitely disappointing. I mean, 26 goals in 46 games last season, and 19 and 59 this year. I think the minimum goals people expected for him this season was 30, including us. If we go back to our first show, my concern moving forward is, as Andrew, you mentioned his shooting percentage. He's become predictable in many ways, like where he likes to shoot. And the other thing is he misses the net a lot. Like he gets a lot of good chances and fires wide. I guess he's trying to pick little corners here and there, which snipers do. But I think he's got to be more just getting the puck on net and being a little less predictable. He likes that high short side shot, especially on the power play, mixing it up a bit. So I think there is some reason for concern, especially when you look at how well Nick Suzuki's been playing. And you would think that Coffield would sort of feed off that and have more goals. So the shoulder you mentioned also, Andrew, like you wonder if there's a shoulder 100%? Is he still, first year coming back from what was a pretty major surgery, especially for a goal scorer and a shooter? So I have some reason for his concern moving forward. They gave him all that money to score goals, right? I mean, Marty St. Louis talks a lot about how well he plays playing away from the puck, and he's improved defensively, and he has. But they gave him all that money to score goals, and the goals haven't come this season like I think all of us expected.
Now, a move that Kent Hughes made was a minor one. He picked up Colin White off waivers. What do you make of this decision, Stu?
Well, Colin White, another guy who used to be Kent Hughes used to be his agent. Alex Newhook, the same thing. A couple other guys, Mike Matheson. So it's a case of he knows what he's getting, and he's just looking for a veteran guy. They sent Gignac back to Laval to hopefully help them get into the playoffs. I think that was the main reason behind that, and they just sort of needed a body to pick up. He's got it's not a very expensive contract, under $1 million. It's 1 year for this year. He knows the guy. I think that's key because I think he knows that he would be a good fit in the locker room coming in, a good veteran presence with a young team. So I think it's just a case of Kent Hughes wanted to pick up a veteran center. He saw White's name on the waiver wire. He knows him. He's been his agent, and he figures this is a good way to pick him up and send Gignac back to Laval, where he can hopefully help the Rocket get into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think, like Stu said, Ken Hughes knows him. He got him for the right price, so it basically increases the depth in that position, and that's basically what he is, a depth player that allows them, the flexibility to use him or not use him, and just a small move, but a move to increase, their depth at that position.
Yeah, and it solidifies Laval as well, right? Getting to send Gignac down there, and he's been their best player this year at forward, so he gets to help them during their attempted playoff spot, trying to secure that, trying to get into the playoffs. So it's a win all around. It's a small move, as you both mentioned, but it's also the last chance probably for Colin White to prove that he can be an NHL player. This guy who, when he started out in the league, had a pretty decent first couple of years, and it's just, yeah, like he was a very good player, and just things didn't work out for him. So this is, I think Frankie Corrado said it on the broadcast a couple games ago. He said it was like last chance university, and clearly, like, right, when it's your last chance, this is a guy who has been in your corner since you were a kid, picking you up, giving you this chance. It's a very thin lineup up the middle. He's going to have an opportunity to play some big minutes. So Colin White, show us what you got.
Yeah, and last chance indeed. I mean, he went to Pittsburgh on a PTO this season, the tryout contract, and he ended up going down to the AHL, playing most of the games there. So yeah, definitely Kent Hughes giving somebody he knows, as you say, a last chance to try and stick in the NHL.
Now, how would you evaluate the development of Caden Primo this year? Do you think that this was a waste, having the three goalies, not really allowing him to develop to his full potential? Rick, what's your take on it?
Well, the kid's been given 13 games to play to date, which is not enough, or not what a goaltender needs to try and hone his skills. I mean, we've always talked about his inconsistency in his play. To me, a wasted time. I know that we've harped on this three goalie situation for a good part of the year, hoping that this wouldn't be dragging on, but it has, and it's still an unhealthy situation to have this type of scenario, in the goaltender ranks. And in all fairness to the kid, 24 years old, it's time to decide, okay, are we going to run with this young man and see what he can do, give him more games or not, and maybe trade deadline, there's going to be something that might happen. I don't know if he's in the mix or not, but a real wasted year for him as far as his development goes. And it's unfortunate, but it's the name of the game sometimes.
Yeah, instinctually, I think you look at it, and we look at this three goalie situation, and we've heard from the goalies this year behind the scenes, nobody likes it, right? Having an extra goalie in there where you have to share workload, share practice time, share the net, all that stuff, and you get fewer opportunities to play. But just looking at Caden Primo's own play, this is the first season in a long time where he's shown a little bit of promise. So maybe it's not a total waste. Maybe it's a waste that he hasn't gotten twice as many games to play and capitalize on actually looking like an NHL goaltender. But overall, he's still made progress in his own game. So I think if you're Caden Primo, you got to hang your hat on that and focus on that and drill down and continue to get better, because he's at a stage now where he's got to make the NHL. He's waiver eligible, so he's got to control his own destiny a little bit here. And it sucks that it's a 3-goalie situation that he has to work through, but I think he's been doing a pretty good job of it.
Yeah, I think the person that dislikes the 3-goalie system the most is Marty St. Louis. So Ken Hughes has told him, you got 3 goalies and you got to play them all. You figured out how to do it. I mean, you'd obviously love to play Sam Montembeault and he'd like to have a regular backup. But I asked Caden Primo the other day this exact question. Has this been a wasted development year for you? And he said it hasn't been. He said he'd rather be with the Canadiens in the NHL than be playing in the AHL at this point. Because he said every goalie wants to play more. No goalie is going to tell you they want to play less games. And he said it has been difficult at times. But he said what's helped is the fact they have 2 rinks in Brossard at the practice facility. So with the 3 goalies, Eric Raymond, the goalie coach, is able to take the 3rd goalie on the separate ice and do individual work with him. And Primo said mentally he has improved this year as a goalie and reading the play. And he said when he was younger, that was one of his strengths with his hockey IQ and be able to read the play. And he said he thinks he's really improved in that aspect of the game this year. Part of that is working with Raymond. Part of that is watching so many games, either from the press box or at the end of the bench. So, I mean, I don't think he was going to say, yeah, it's been a wasted year. But he made some good points about why he doesn't think it has been and why he's happier. Although he's not happy with the 3 goalie situation, he's happier to be in Montreal right now than if he'd been sent to Laval. And he also said that it was interesting. He said Kent Hughes has been like his biggest supporter. He said he basically told him that I still believe in you. I asked him about does it feel good to know that he thinks that if you were put on waivers you would clear. And as Primo said, well, you never know, right? I mean, that's hearsay. Like maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. But it's just the fact that Kent Hughes told him, like, I believe in you. Like, we believe in you moving forward. That's why we're keeping you here. I think that has a lot to do with the more positive attitude he's had towards being a 3rd goalie.
Now, another player, do you see Michael Pezzetta having a future with the Montreal Canadiens? Andrew?
Every time I count out Michael Pezzetta, he ends up finding a way to endear himself again. So I think he's one fight or one scrappy goal away from continuing to find a way to keep himself in the roster. He seems to always find a way. He's one heck of a hard worker, and he seems like an absolutely fantastic guy in the room. So I think everybody on the team cheers for him as well. So I don't know if he's long-term got a spot, but right now during the rebuild, I think that he's a guy that everybody likes to have around. And there are games where Michael Pezzetta is an excellent 4th liner. It's not every game. Some games he gets in penalty trouble, and some games his defensive awareness is not the greatest, and sometimes he can't connect on plays for the 4th line. But overall, I think he's got a pretty safe job until they take it to the next step. And even then, I think he's going to be an NHLer for a while. He's got enough skill that he can find spots on teams. I think the problem with the Canadiens currently is the 4th line is usually not necessarily a line. It's just what's left. And it's not necessarily players that work well together. It's just how many players do we have left that we can put on a line and ice for 5 to 10 minutes a night? And that's just not an ideal situation.
I scratch my head when I'm seeing Jesse Ullin in the lineup and Michael Pezzetta sitting in the press box. I think it's 38 games now. Ullin doesn't have a goal. He's there to be sort of provide some kind of offense. He's providing none. Michael Pezzetta, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get like 7 minutes of ice time where he's going to give you everything he has. He's going to finish every single check. He's going to have defensemen looking over their back when they go in the corner to get the puck. He's going to fight if he needs to fight to defend a teammate. He's not a fun guy to play against. And that 4th line role is not an easy role. And I spoke with Pezzetta about this earlier this season. He said there's times he'll go 25 minutes without getting on the ice, or 30 minutes. He said, I'll get a shift like 8 minutes into the second period, and then I don't get back on again. Then you have the intermission, and then it's like 7-8 minutes into the third period. He says, like 25, 30 minutes, you haven't moved, and now you got to get on the ice and get your legs going. And it's not an easy thing to do, playing on the 4th line in the NHL. And for a guy like Pezzetta who accepts that role, flourishes in that role, and takes pride in the fact that he can do that role, I think there's a spot for him, as you said, Andrew. If it's not in Montreal, I think it's somewhere else. He's a great, he's just a great guy. The teammates love him. When Arbor Jacka got sent down to Laval, it was Pezzetta who was calling him and keeping in touch with him and FaceTiming him all the time to make sure his spirits were good and telling him about how, when he got sent down from the AHL to the East Coast League and how he dealt with that. So for Pezzetta, you know what you're going to get with Michael Pezzetta. And again, I'm surprised when I walk in the press box and I see him sitting there and I see Ullinen on the ice.
Yeah, as you guys mentioned, quality guy, well liked, a guy that plays his role really well. And, the big question is, as the game starts to evolve, I think that a lot of the guys look to him as be the enforcer up front, a guy that will, set the tone or, clean up some stuff that needs to be cleaned up. He's the go-to guy. As the fighting becomes less and less, he's probably able to weather that storm of still bringing an ingredient that can help out on the fourth line with his effort and his real care to detail. I think he can find a job, whether it's in Montreal or somewhere else. I think that what he brings to the game, at 25 years old, he still has some time left in him. And I said it'd be different if he, wasn't able to play at all. But we've seen him in the past. He brings a certain grit up front that he consistently does and really cares about his teammates and is well accepted.
Well, Rick, when you were playing defense, you must have known when a guy like him was on the ice, right? Like when you're going in the corner, he's coming.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there'd be more than one like that back in the day. So
just ask Peter Svoboda, right?
Yeah, how to get your nose rearranged to go into Philadelphia. So, anyways, it's nice to see. I've had some time to spend with him at different events. Michael Pezzetta is a quality kid and knows what he's got to do.
Well, that's it for us this week. Thank you for joining us on Hockey Inside Out. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and like it as well. And sign up for the Hockey Inside Out newsletters. You just have to go to montrealgazette.com/newsletters and also check out hockeyinsideout.com for all your daily Habs coverage.